Well, it's good to see such a good crowd on a very, very cold evening. And what an odd week it's been where the snow misses us south. I mean, usually it's going north of us and it's south of us in great abundance. I mean, I'm hearing 6 inches, 8 inches, these amazing numbers that I don't think I've seen in places I live in. So snow at the beach, who would have thunk? 2025 has a lot of interesting things happening, so it's going to be an interesting year. Don't forget our goal this year is cultivate. We're seeking to cultivate and stir one another up and stir ourselves up, and I hope that you're making some goals, spiritual goals this year. I hope that you're reading your Bible and trying to pray more regularly and find time to be with your family, and if you have children at home and they're young, teach them at home. We are focusing on social media in here, and we have covered a lot of territory, and this is one of those classes where we're shifting gears again into a different set of ideas. The last 2 weeks we've been talking about identity issues. I think the lessons were called selfies and profiles, and how you present yourself in public, and what you should hold back, and maybe some things you should keep secret, and maybe some things you should save for your family, for your God, for your church, and really not appropriate for a public forum like a social media platform. Well, now we're going to get into the area of relationships, and tonight's lesson is entitled Friends. Social media has changed our idea of a friend. A friend used to be somebody that you knew in the flesh, that you had talked to face, that you had sat with, maybe ate a meal with, that you at least knew in real life. But now you can have thousands of friends you've never met before in person that you don't even know. You may not even know what they look like. On Facebook, the people you connect with, they call them friends. And I don't know how much damage that's done to the concept of friend. Other platforms use the term followers, which also is fraught with problems and complexities. I mean, what does it mean to have followers? Are you a cult leader? What's going on with these terms? So we're going to talk about true relationships versus the virtual world. This is not to say that you cannot use social media as a tool for friendship. I mean, I find it very useful in communicating with friends, but it's not a substitute. It's just a tool. I read a book a few years back by E.M. Forster called The Machine Stops. It's one of these futuristic sci-fi dystopian books, and it's set in a time when the Earth is uninhabitable, and everybody lives underground. And it's not safe for people to even dwell in the same room together. So even family units are separated into individual cells, and they don't ever interact with one another. And everything is controlled by the machine. That's why the name of the book is The Machine Stops. Through the machine, they communicate. Through the machine, they see one another. Does this sound kind of familiar? This book was written in the early 1900s, but it sounds a lot like social media. So this son, I forget his name, he is communicating with his mother, and he says to his mother, "I want to see you." And she says, what are you talking about, silly? You're looking right at me. They're looking at each other through screens. She says, "I see you and you see me and we're talking to one another. What do you mean I want to see you?" And he said, "No, I want to see you not through the machine. Not through the machine." And that is something we need today. We need to see each other not through machines, but in real life. I think Forster was onto something there. He saw it coming long before the internet was even a dream in man's imagination. I read a lot of sci-fi when I was putting this material together. So Isaac Asimov has a book called The Naked Sun. And in this book, there's something really interesting going on here. he anticipates a future where people are afraid of touching one another, afraid of contact, afraid of getting close to one another. And this is on a planet, some other planet, I forget the name of the planet. And a detective from Earth goes to this planet to investigate a murder. And as he's investigating this crime, he's doing things the way they do on Earth. And on Earth, they talk close, face to face. They shake hands. They handle one another. And on this planet, that's inappropriate. And he's making people really uncomfortable. And I don't know why that last quote is on the screen. It's supposed to be a different one. Well, I do know why. I messed up. But in that book, he anticipates a future where people can't make eye contact. And they don't know how to treat one another in person. And again, it's prescient. It's seeing into a future that is now ours. And you think about, in addition to the social media, what COVID has done. Ava said something the other day, just in jest. She said, 6 feet, 6 feet. You know, and we know what that means now, right? We were told for a long time to stay 6 feet apart from one another, go one way down grocery store aisles, and don't get close. And this has affected the behavior, especially of our young people who have not had a whole lot of practice in real-time social interaction before all these things started falling in place. We're told that kids are dating less, they're staying home more, they're getting their driver's license later, they're not working, they're not making eye contact, they're doing very poorly in job interviews. And these are the effects of trying to live only in a virtual world. And so we need to talk about relationships and how we can improve them. And before we do that, though, we do need to ask the question, are relationships really worth the trouble? Are relationships trouble? Let's admit it. Human beings are mean to each other, or misunderstand each other all the time, or are awkward with one another. All relationships are hard. You hear married people say, marriage is hard, and friendship is hard, and parent-child relationships are hard. Families are hard. Every Thanksgiving you hear people say, oh, I'm trying to get my courage up to go see the family. You know, relationships are tough, so some people are just checking out on them. They're saying, you know, I'm not going to bother having relationships. But there's some innate need in every one of us for relationships. It's the way we're wired. Here's some of the problems, though. Only 2 out of 10 men say they have friends they can trust. Now, if you're above that average, count yourself fortunate. A lot of men struggle with close relationships. They know a lot of guys at work, and they may have friends that they enjoy recreation with, but do they trust them? Could they tell them their deepest, innermost secrets? Could they confess their sins to them? Could they seek advice on a major problem with them? Only 2 out of 10 men say they can. You're in the minority if you have friends you can trust. 6 out of 10 women say they have friends they can rely on. So women seem to do better with this than men. In the U.S., between 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. This is just another sign of how difficult relationships can be. And you've heard this number all your life. I know I have. 50% of marriages end in divorce. That number includes multiple marriages. So you've been, it includes the guys who've been married 3 times and been divorced 3 times, as well as, the first-time divorces. So it's not as bad as it looks, but it shows that marriage can be very difficult. That number is going down, but only because kids are deciding to just cohabitate and not get married, which is not, a good thing either. And we think about Jesus. He had the disciples with him, but one of his hand-chosen 12 disciples, Judas Iscariot, betrayed him with a kiss. People have tried to spin that story and try to figure out Judas, but At the end of the day, he was a friend who betrayed his Lord. And John is reminded of the psalm written by David in Psalm 41, verse 9. Even my close friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted his heel against me. You know, that is one of the saddest verses in the Bible to me. When I think about David and all the betrayal he faced, and then, of course, our Lord and the betrayal he faced. And it wasn't just Judas, was it? Peter betrayed him, denying him 3 times. At one point, all the disciples scattered and went away. As far as I can tell, John is the only one of the men who stayed with Jesus all the way up to the point where Jesus sent him away from the cross with his own mother. The women were true to him, but his best friends, the 12 disciples, they betrayed him. So that's part of the human experience. Rocky relationships, complexities in human interaction. Yet, we need it. Is it worth the trouble? Yes, it's worth the trouble. When God created humanity, He started with one man. And the animals, it appears that they were created in multiples. There were lots of giraffes and octopuses and ostriches and multiples of everything except this one species, human beings. There was just one man. And in Genesis 2:18, the Lord Himself says, "It is not good that the man should be alone." And that's where you read that He vowed to make a helper suitable for Adam, and fashioned Eve out of his rib and brought him to the man. And Adam in joy says, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called a woman, for she was taken out of man." And they were married, and they became one flesh. And that's the first marriage. You see here evidence that we already know, that we need each other. Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." It just means that a real friend is going to be loyal and is going to be a great asset in your life and will be there for you in the toughest times of your life. So friendship is good for you. Here's some stats and some facts. Lonely people, according to researchers, live significantly shorter lives than the general population. There's not necessarily any nutritional reasons for that. They may exercise a lot. All of those variables don't really affect this number. They lead shorter lives than the general population. Loneliness is not good for you. Even in a field like engineering, where you think it's all mechanical and you're dealing with machines or maybe other types of engineering, and you don't think of it as a people career. But in a field like engineering, about 15% of a person's financial success is due to technical knowledge, and 85% is due to dealing with people personally, social skills. 85% in a science like engineering. Really challenges what you think about the need for relationships. Social incompetence accounts for 60 to 80% of failures. And then I like this quote by Robert Louis Stevenson. "So long as we are loved by others, I would almost say that we are indispensable, and no man is useless while he has a friend." Stevenson saw friendship as something that completes us, adds to our value. You're more valuable with others than you are alone. And I think that's a beautiful thought. Think of all the biblical relationships and how those individuals would be if their stories were just about them by themselves. What are some examples? Let me get you involved here. Your mind's probably flooded with examples of biblical relationships that made both people better. Yeah, that's the first one that usually comes to mind. David and Jonathan. Yeah. they were the best of friends. And would David have gotten to where he was without Jonathan? Not in the way that he got there. God was going to use him. But Jonathan was part of God's plan, I think. And I think Jonathan was bettered by David. Who else? Paul and Timothy. And with Paul, you could add a lot of others, right? Silas, Barnabas, Luke. You know, the list goes on and on and on. Paul knew, much as Jesus did, the value of having friends assist you. And since threw it out, Jesus and his disciples. Any other examples? Yeah, there's that verse in John 11, verse 5, that says, now Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, these brothers and sisters that lived in Bethany, not far from Jerusalem. And John points that out in a way that says this was a special relationship. Jesus had circles of friends, and there was an inner circle, a tight-knit group, and I believe they were probably his closest friends. And then you had the 12 disciples, but within that there were 3 that he would take with him on special occasions, Peter, James, and John. There were the 12 disciples, which were picked out a larger group of disciples. There were the multitudes that followed him. So he had special relationships that were for companionship and moral support. You're missing one that I'm thinking of. I'm not going to move on until somebody guesses it. That's the one. What about the women? Ruth and Naomi, right? Naomi thought, I'm going to do this by myself. And Ruth said, no, you're not. Where you go, I will go. And both of those women's lives were changed by that relationship they had together. So there are many others. A long time ago, I did a sermon series on relationships in the Bible, and every week we went over a different relationship, and I remember just how rich that material was, and it's really good to think about how those relationships improved the lives of the people involved. Tim brought this up. The definition of a friend in Deuteronomy 13:6 is one who is as your own soul. And you compare that, of course, with David and Jonathan, whose souls were knit together. I think that's based on the same concept. So, what is more valuable than a soul? The word soul is an interesting word, and it's used in different contexts, and sometimes it's interchangeable with spirit, and sometimes like in 1 Thessalonians 5, it's distinguished from the Spirit as the breath of life, or the biological processes of life, the mysterious life essence. And sometimes a soul is just your life or your person. What's more valuable than your soul? Jesus asked the rhetorical question, what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Now, you think about that. Your soul is probably your most valuable possession. And you put that together with this definition of a friend. A friend is someone who is as your own soul. Does that not show you the value of friendship? I think that it does. You equate friendship with souls, and you see how important they really are. He's your fellow man as I have loved you. In other words, instead of as yourself. Yeah. I see. Yeah, love one another as I've loved you. Yes, that's beyond your own self. Put the others first, and we'll talk about that kind of love in a moment. I got a chart on that. Here's a quote from Henry Adams. One friend in a lifetime is much. 2 are many. 3 are hardly possible. You may just have one friend and think, I don't have much in my life. Well, Henry Adams would say you got a lot there with one good friend. 2 are many. He said 3 is hardly possible. So if you can count more than 3 good friends, you're in the minority among the human race, according to Henry Adams. So how do you make real friends? How do you get offline and forget about the followers and the Facebook friends and engage with people and build something that's true and something that's real and lasting that will enrich your life? Here's some biblical suggestions. And keep in mind, these aren't guarantees because relationships are dynamic. And we'll talk a little bit about this, but you know, when you're involving two human beings, you're involving a lot of complexity there. But these are general rules that are usually true. They usually hold. And the first one is this: get interested in other people. Get the focus off yourself. We talked a lot about that in the last 2 weeks. Social media is all about, you know, parading around and putting your best self forward and fragmenting your personality into what you think will impress the world. Get out of that mode and just start thinking about the other person. Dale Carnegie said, you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years of trying to get other people interested in you. Quit wasting your energy. Does it work on you? I mean, just think about it. Do you like people pushing themselves on you or trying to get you interested in them or showing off or bragging about themselves? You don't like that. So what makes you think other people are going to like that? Do you like it when people ask you questions and show interest in what you do and who you are and who your family is and how you're feeling? Doesn't that make you feel great? Don't you want to be around those people? That's what Carnegie, that's the wisdom he's passing down there. To have friends, you must be a friend. That's the truth. I mean, it's simple, it's common sense, but so few of us take that to heart. I like this quotation. This is a lengthy excerpt, but I think it's worth reading. It's by Andrew Sullivan. He says, unlike a variety of other relationships, friendship requires an acknowledgement by both parties that they are involved or it fails to exist. One can admire someone who is completely unaware of our admiration, and the integrity of that admiration is not lost. One may even employ someone without knowing who it is specifically one employs. One may be related to a great aunt whom one has never met and may fail ever to meet. And one may, of course, fall in love with someone without the beloved being aware of it or reciprocating the love at all. And in all these cases, the relationships are still what they are, whatever the attitude of the other person in them. They are relationships of admiration, business, family, or love. But friendship is different. Friendship uniquely requires mutual self-knowledge and will. It takes two competent, willing people to be friends. You cannot impose a friendship on someone. Although you can impose a crush, a lawsuit, or an obsession, if friendship is not reciprocated, it simply ceases to exist, or rather, it never existed in the first place. So it makes friendship so hard. You got to get the other person to play along. You see the contrast he's making? You can have an employer-employee relationship without the employer really knowing you. You can have a family relationship with a great aunt you've never met, and the family connection stays intact. But in friendship, both people have to be on board. Both have to cooperate. And that means both have to be interested in one another. Remember, we're talking about the first step is get interested in other people. This is the advice of Paul, and we've read this several times already in this class. Very important verse to the proper management of social media and social relations in general. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Philippians 2, 3, and 4. He follows that with the example of Christ. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. And he humbled himself to the point of death, even death on a cross. Jesus is the model of being interested in other people. And he was surrounded by friends. So get interested in others. And number two, Don't worry about popularity. You know, I know our teenagers aren't in here, and when we think of popularity, we adults usually kind of turn that off and say, well, popularity, that's a word that only teenagers worry about. But we have our desires for popularity. We may just call it by a different name, but we want people to like us. We want a lot of people to like us. And social media really brings that out. We want the likes or the hearts or the comments. We want our posts to be shared. We want as many friends and followers as we can, and this kind of stuff can really start going to your head. Victor Hugo called popularity glory's small change. In other words, it's there's a little bit of glory to it, but it's cheap glory. Here is, I looked up, I wanted to see who had the most followers on Twitter, and big surprise, or I'm sorry, X. And big surprise is Elon Musk, the guy who owns X. And you probably can't see it from there, but he has 213.8 million followers. How many of those people does he know? Does that mean he has a lot of rich relationships in his life? I haven't studied that guy much. I saw him at the inauguration. Wow. That was, if you hadn't seen that, Google that. That's some interesting behavior. But that many followers does not mean he has a lot of friends in his life or that he's fulfilled. Number 2 on the list, Barack Obama. That surprised me. It's been a while since that guy's been president, but he has 130.8 million followers. I better move on. There's some things I want to say, but I'm going to. So on Instagram, I looked up on Instagram who had the most followers on Instagram, because this is what the kids are following, you know. And there are these guys called footballers. Roman, what's a footballer? It's a soccer player, right? I thought you would know. The 2 top people with the most followers on Instagram are soccer players. And this is Cristiano Ronaldo, 648 million followers. Can you imagine that? That's double the population of the United States following him. Does he know these people? Does that mean his profile picture, he looks like he's with his family, looks like he has relationships, but they're not determined by that following on Instagram. The next one here is Leo Messi. Did I say that right? He's over in the States now playing soccer, right? Had to start calling it soccer instead of football. 505 million followers, but that doesn't mean that he has a lot of rich relationships. This is all just illusion. It's not real. And sometimes it doesn't even fit their true following today. They might have gotten a lot of followers 10 years ago that just forgot to delete them from their account. So what's real? I've talked to you about this word FOMO, fear of missing out. A lot of times we go online and we see our friends, we see pictures of our friends with others and they're out having a good time. And we think, well, I didn't get invited to that. When was that? What was it? I talked to that person that morning, they didn't say anything about going out and doing that. And you start imagining all these terrible things when in reality, maybe you just weren't on top of their minds that day. Maybe they thought you were doing something else. Maybe they just didn't want to be with you that night. You know, they have that choice. It's a free country. But what FOMO is, it's very natural and it's common and it's jealousy. That's what it is. When you see people that you supposedly love having a good time and it makes you angry, that's called envy. And it's very bad for you, and it is a spiritual problem. It's one of the works of the flesh. It's a sin. We've got to love people in our lives to the point that when we see them having a good time without us, we're happy for them. I mean, not just pretending to be happy for them, but genuinely happy for them. And when we get to that point, and we may never totally get there, but when we get to that point, we're starting to learn the love of Christ. So, this is a verse that's taken out of context a lot, especially in the King James Version. The King James translation begins, "A man that hath friends must show himself friendly," which gets back to the wisdom of that slide we had a while ago that says, in order to have friends, you need to be a friend. And that's how this verse is often interpreted. That's true wisdom, but that's not what this verse is saying. And the ESV is a more accurate translation. A man of many companions, in other words, a popular person, may come to ruin. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. There are two lines there. This is an example of an antithetical proverb. The two lines state opposite ideas. So let's take them one at a time. The first line, what does it mean to say a man of many companions may come to ruin? What does that mean? What do you have to do to have 300 million followers? Be all things to all people. You have to make compromises. You have to deceive a little bit, because everybody that's following you, they're not in agreement, and you have to make them all think that you're on their side, and that eventually brings you to ruin. But there's another side to that. There is a friend, notice the singular. You got multiple companions, but on the other side, just one friend who sticks closer than a brother. I've heard people say, that means that friends are stronger bonds than family. That's not what he's saying. He's saying there are friends that are as close or even closer to you than family. And you need to look for that. Even don't worry about quantity, you're looking for quality in friendships. And remember what Henry Adams said, 1 is rare, 2, not many people have 2 friends, 3 is almost never seen. So value the few friendships you have and cultivate friendships in your life. It's all about quality. So the English language is really bad at showing the different nuances of love. I suppose there's a variety of words that describe love, but we have this word love that covers all kinds of shades of loving. The Greek language is much more precise, and you've heard this before. This is done a lot. I hesitate to do it because you've heard it so many times, but I think it fits in right here when we're talking about popularity and looking for quality love over quantity love. So one word is storge. And storge is the Greek word for fondness toward those who are naturally close to you, like a mother for her child. Family love, that's what storge. And I always remember that one because it sounds like stork, and you know the myth about storks bringing babies. That's how I think of it. That's how I learned it in Greek class when I was a freshman at Freed-Hardeman. Storge. And then the next word is eros. Eros is not a biblical word. It's not in the Bible, but it was a Greek word used in classical Greek. And it's for passion. It's the word from which we get the word erotic. It has to do with romantic love. Infatuation, maybe. Philia is the noun. Phileo is the verb. Represents a warm, affectionate love, the love of friends. And it's a good love. It's part of the word Philadelphia. Adelphos means brother. Philia, love. So Philadelphia is brotherly love. And our city, Philadelphia, is a city of brotherly love. It's a warm, it's an emotional love. And God calls for it. He asks us to love each other with that kind of love. But it's not the highest love. When Jesus was asking Peter, do you love me? Jesus is using this last word, agape. And Peter would come back because he denied and he felt foolish and he had denied Jesus. He would come back with philia. You know that I phileo you. You know that I'm your friend. And Jesus said, no, Peter, do you love me? Agape. And Peter said, yes, you know I'm your friend. He couldn't say the word agape. And so then the third time, and you don't see this in the English translation of John 21, but the third time Jesus comes back and he says, Peter, are you my friend? Do you even phileo? Do you even have affection for me? And I don't know, that just gives me goosebumps thinking about what was really going on in the language there. But agape is that highest, purest form of love that James was talking about a moment ago. The truest, purest form of love that we learn from God. Love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, because God is love. That's agape. When Jesus said the greatest commandment, a new commandment I give to you, love one another, even as I've loved you, he's using the word agape there. That's quality love. If you can find people who love you like that, you've got a great blessing in your life. Okay, really quickly, third suggestion on how to make friends. Don't pursue friends, pursue a purpose. Sometimes we think, I want friendship in my life, so I'm going to look for somebody that looks like they'll be a great friend to me. This person looks popular. This person looks stylish. This person looks funny. I pick them as my friend, and then you try to figure out how to get that person to like you. That's the wrong way to try to make friends. I use this quote a lot because I think it's true, by C.S. Lewis. He says, that's why those pathetic people who simply want friends can never make any. The very condition of having friends is that we should want something else besides friends. Where the truthful answer to the question, do you see the same truth, would be, I see nothing and I don't care about the truth, I only want a friend. No friendship can arise, though affection, of course, may. There would be nothing for the friendship to be about, and friendship must be about something, even if it were only an enthusiasm for dominoes or white mice. Those who have nothing can share nothing. Those who are going nowhere can have no fellow travelers. If you want friendship in your life, you need to be going somewhere. You need to be on a journey. You need to have a higher purpose. And as you pursue that, and that, of course, should be Christ. Christ gives that purpose to you. As you pursue that, you look to your left and your right, and you see those people who will become your closest friends. Just think about who your closest friends are in your life today. Those of you who are fortunate enough to have true relationships in your life. Think about those people. How did you become friends with them? Did you just pick them out of a crowd and say, I think that looks like a person that I could be friends with, and just start smothering them with affection? No, that's not how you made friends. You probably met them doing something you both love. You probably met them at church, or you met them at work, or you met them chasing a higher purpose. And that's how friendships are made. Jesus valued friendships. And I like this verse in Mark 3:14. He appointed 12, these are the apostles, of course, so that they might be with him and he might send them out to preach. We missed that first part, first reason. There are two reasons there. Yes, he wanted to send them out to preach, but he also wanted them to be with him. He taught them relationally. And he says to us that he wants to be our friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. This is all about befriending Jesus, not for the friendship, but for the purpose. Following his commandments is following the way of God, chasing that higher purpose. And Jesus says, in pursuing my mission, in pursuing my light, my way, you're going to be friends with me. And what greater friend can we have than that? Paul thought there was nothing greater than having friendship with Christ. I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake I've suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ. And so we need true relationships in our lives. And the best way to cultivate them is not on social media, but it's in pursuing a higher calling, the calling that God gives us. And those relationships can be made in the Lord's church. Yeah, Don, you Absolutely. Yeah. Friends change minds, not facts. You got to have the facts, but nobody's going to listen to you unless they feel that you care about them. So friendship is a very important part of evangelism, which is another reason we need to be making those real relationships in life. That's a good point. Good thing to close the class on. Appreciate it.